So, welcome back to Dr. Politics, and we're kind of coming into the final stretch now for our general election episodes. We're here with Mark Stanton, the Fine Gael candidate for Cork East. He's also the son of outgoing Fine Gael TD David Stanton, who we've had on the podcast a few times. Mark, you're very welcome onto the podcast this morning.
Thanks, William, Jack. Thanks for having me. Delighted to be on.
And we're so glad to have you. So, Mark, how has the campaign been going so far?
I think pretty well. But it's tough to say. Someone was asking me during the week, what I'm feeling like, and it feels a little bit like pre-season. In sport, I play rugby inside Middleton here, and it feels a little bit like pre-season training, where training feels like it's going pretty well. We've got good numbers out. We're out every night at the moment, knocking on doors, but you don't know what way it's going to be. We're going to shape up on match day. You don't know what the opposition are going to be like. So, it feels like it's going well, but no vote has been cast yet. It's impossible to say. So I think when we're recording this today, we've got a week to go, and we're going to keep going right up until polling day.
And kind of as well, we kind of saw during the week you were on Colbert Has Company.
Colbert, James Colbert's podcast.
Yeah. How did you find that?
It was great. I think it's important to engage, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to come on here with you as well, Jack. It's really important to get on different platforms. I was on CRY blowing y'all as well during the week. Look, I think it's important when you're putting yourself up for election to come on and answer questions from people like yourself, and that's why I was keen to jump on here today.
And it's kind of it's kind of been a very kind of short campaign in terms that it's only been like a 3-week lead into the election, but you've been out canvassing since about the kind of end of September.
Well, earlier than that. I know it's funny. It probably feels like a short campaign for most people because, the election was called, and I think there was just over 3 weeks of a kind of a full election campaign, shall we say. But I was selected at convention by Fine Gael back in July, and I really started work back then. So it does feel like a short campaign for me. I've been, meeting people essentially since before the convention. I was meeting Fine Gael members and sitting down with them and talking to them about my candidacy. And then from then getting out and meeting with people, because it's, as you know, Jack, from I think talking to other candidates as well and being a constituent yourself, it's a massive constituency. So there was a lot of ground to cover, and we were trying our best to cover as much of the constituency as possible, and knock on every door, and right from Cove and Middleton, Youghal, and Carrigtwoonlow, which is a huge town in the southern side of the constituency, and then all your villages as well, like covering off Killa, Martyr, Hadda, Whitegate, Ballycotton. Now obviously I've got a running mate, Noel McCarthy, in the northern side of the constituency, so Noel has been covering off that side, and I've been focusing on the southern end. I think it would be really difficult to try and knock on every door across the entire constituency, but we're definitely making a good go of knocking on every door in the southern half.
Because I know Cork East is probably one of the larger constituencies in Cork in terms of population density. Kind of like in the kind of southern half, like you were saying there, like you have Cove, Carrigtwoonlow, Middleton, Youghal, all kind of big habitation towns, all in excess of 10,000 people living there, and even Carrigtwoonlow, pushing 7,500 plus. And we've even had Anthony Barry on a few months ago, who's the councillor for Fine Gael for Carrigtwoonlow, and he was even saying it to us himself, how many people are now living in Carrigtwoonlow, that there's been a massive influx of people into East Cork over the last 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, definitely in the southern end, we've seen lots of houses getting built. In obviously Carrigtwoonlow, houses now going into Waterrock, new housing developments in Middleton, places as well like Ladies Bridge has really grown in size, with new developments in there, and Killa as well. So it's great. Lots of people are realizing how great a place East Cork is to live and choosing to move here, which is brilliant to see.
And kind of like you yourself used to work in the recruitment industry, you know, so you know all about employment and all about kind of like what is needed for to have a sustainable workforce. So how have you kind of found kind of jumping from, say, working in the recruitment industry or in the recruitment sector into kind of like knocking on doors and kind of running as a potential candidate for Fine Gael in the next stall?
Yeah, so obviously both, you know, in recruitment, the role is about helping people find work, and then working with employers to train and find good people. But effectively, it is all about people, right?
Mhm.
So I would spend, the days in recruitment on the phone to people, out meeting with people, talking with people, and you end up getting a real insight into people's lives when you're doing that as well, because you know someone's job is a huge part of their lives, but it's one part. You end up talking about, family situation, living situation, kids, all of that stuff comes into account when someone's looking at changing roles. So in a way, when I was in that role and chatting with people, it was a really good almost training ground for politics, because now, as you said, I'm out knocking on doors, but also fielding calls and emails and messages coming in on Instagram and Facebook and everywhere else, from potential voters. So it's similar. It's chatting with people about challenges and then trying to come up with solutions. A previous experience as well in the Students' Union in UCC, so it's not my first time running for election. Had to run a campaign in UCC previously, and was elected Students' Union president there back in 2014, and I think that was a constituency of 20,000 people, so a little bit smaller than Cork East, but had really good experience there, sitting on college boards, supporting students with different issues that came up, working with different campus committees, the likes of the finance committee, the university management team. I was the first student union president invited to sit on that. I was on the university governing body, so really good experience at a young age to high level decision making for the university campus. And I think again that'll give me, hopefully, if I'm elected, a pretty good grounding in politics, albeit that was at a student level. And this would be, covering absolutely everyone and everything. And look, I guess important to mention as well, Jack, and I think you referenced it at the start, from a political household. So Dad was first elected when I was 5 years old. It was very normal for us at home. The elections have been snapshots of our lives or timestamps of our lives for the whole family over the last 27 years. So every 5 years we we end up kind of putting everything into to try to get Dad elected. But between those periods as well, I would have done a lot of work with Dad in the background in talking about different policy, kind of arguing back and forth on different policy positions and that Fine Gael might have taken. And I think I provided him a good sounding board, because I was very interested in politics, so provided a good sounding board for him over the last number of years, and I'd be hoping, if I can get elected, that he would do the same. Just to say on that point as well, like, my own family in the election so far have been brilliant. My brother Alan moved back from Vancouver to help out with the campaign. And I know he was annoyed that I didn't mention him on the Colbert podcast, so making sure to get him in on this one. And then my brother Kevin's living in Dublin, but has come down to help out as well. And all my cousins have chipped in, helping out canvassing on different nights. My wife Kate has been super, very supportive. She's not someone who's from a political background, but has thrown in and come out canvassing, and she's actually really good at it. Definitely not her. Doesn't maybe come as naturally to her, as it does with my brothers and things, because we've done it a lot of the times over the years, but she's brilliant at it. So I think she's after getting the bug now as well.
And I think that, like, I think rallying your family around you during an election is so important. Like, we've kind of seen, like, another good example of someone rallying their family around them for a general election was Holly Cairns down in Cork out west in 2020, and kind of like like Holly's family did an absolutely outstanding job of getting her across the line in 2020, and she did have an amazing team of people around her as well. And I think you're very, very lucky in respect that your dad, as you said, is the outgoing Fine Gael councillor for Cork East, Deputy David Stanton, and I'd say he's probably looking forward to retirement.
Yeah, like I'd say he hasn't had a chance to come to terms with it fully yet. I haven't had much time to sit down and chat with him either, to be honest, because the Dáil was dissolved, so we were straight into election mode. But it'll be interesting to sit down with him, whatever the outcome of this election, whether I'm elected or not, to sit down with him in a few weeks' time and reflect on the career that he had. We're obviously all very proud of him. Being a TD and representing the area. But also representing Ireland very well nationally over the last 27 years. And it's been nice. One of the nice parts of the campaign has been meeting with people on the doorstep that both him and also his office in Middleton have helped over the last 27 years. I think, he's always had a very strong office. They support people right across Cork East. And anytime, people reach out, they always try their very best to help. Olivia has worked in the office there with Dad for that whole time, and she's an absolute fountain of knowledge. She's superb. And then we've got Councillor Rory Cocking working in the office with Dad as well. He was Dad's parliamentary assistant, and then was elected to the council recently. So again, really experienced team. And if I do get elected, I'd be hoping to work with both of them again.
Yeah.
And lean on that experience, because as a first time candidate, there's no point in hiding from it. I definitely. There's a lot of areas that I'll need to really work hard to read up on, because I'm playing catch up with someone who's got 27 years experience. But there's that brilliant team and that brilliant experience in the office there that I'd be hoping to lean on if I'm elected.
And Rory is I've spoken to Rory a few times myself, and he's an absolute Trojan worker, and even Councillor Sinead Shepherd, we've been saying to you as well, that Rory's an absolutely phenomenal worker. So I think you're very lucky with the kind of strong team that your dad had in the office, and I think if you do get elected, that'll give you a big step up over other candidates that got elected, that you already have a tried and tested team in the office that are there to support you.
The Fine Gael team in Cork East in general is very strong. You mentioned already Anthony Barry as well, Councillor Anthony Barry and Carrigtwohill. Obviously, Sinead Shepherd in Cove is excellent and has a great track record of supporting people in Cove. You've got Michael Hagerty as well in the East Cork local electoral area, who's been a very experienced councillor and has been around a long time. Has done an awful lot of work for people over that period of time. And obviously, my running mate, Councillor Noel McCarthy, in Fermoy. Hopefully we can get 2 seats for Fine Gael in Cork East. And Noel will be a TD along with myself, but he's a very experienced councillor in the Fermoy area. We were disappointed not to see. So we had a couple of other candidates running. Kay Dawson in the Fermoy electoral area just missed out narrowly, and also Alison Curtin in Youghal running in the East Cork local electoral area in the local elections. We missed out by about 50 votes. So to just show you that the real fine margins that exist in politics. Alison and Kay, Kay was obviously a councillor previously, was a brilliant councillor. And Alison would have made a super first time councillor for Youghal. But I know they're both still involved and have both been helping out with myself and Noel's campaigns respectively over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and kind of you talked about fine margins there, and I think there's no other better case to use than the case of Holly Cairns in the 2019 local elections, where she was actually elected to Cork County Council by just 1 vote, and that just goes to show you how important it is to encourage people to get out there and vote next Friday.
Absolutely. No, it's vital that people do. And look, whether obviously I'm encouraging people to vote for me, and I'm hoping that I'm making a good case, both with the media that we're doing, but also a lot of the social media and online information that we're putting out, and the press releases that we're putting out, and meeting with people and talking to them about my ideas for the area on the doors. I'm hoping I make a good case for people to vote for me. But at the same time, I would encourage people to go out and vote, full stop, and to use their vote the whole way down the line if they can,
Mm.
because I think it's really important. Like we've got a brilliant voting system in PRSTV,
Yeah.
proportional representation by single transferable vote. And anyone who's been to a count will know how important some of those votes, further down the line can be when transfers start coming into play. So even if I'm not someone's first choice, if they've got their own local candidate, that they want to vote for number one, I'd definitely be asking people to consider voting me 2, 3, or 4, or anywhere down the line, because every single vote counts. It's really important that people go in and use their vote.
Mm. Because I know myself, having studied politics in UCC for the last 2.5 years now, is that Ireland usually operates off a 2.5 party system, you know. Usually it's the two largest parties plus a smaller party in there to kind of support the other two larger parties. So, you know, you might get lucky with transfers in that respect, you know, that like you might get someone who's a Labour supporter might vote for you in the sense that they want to see Fine Gael back in power again, you know. So touch wood that, you know, that you get the transfers, and touch wood that we'll hopefully see in there. Now, this kind of brings me on to my first question, Mark. First proper question, I should say, is about housing, okay? Because as you know on the podcast here, Mark, we've kind of a good presence across East Cork, and a lot of people, as you know, one of the biggest issues they're facing is housing, right? And a big question that was being asked of us was, given the ongoing housing crisis, what practical step will Fine Gael take to accelerate the building of affordable homes without undermining quality or sustainability?
It's a great question, and it's something that's coming up a lot on the doors for us as well. We referenced earlier that there are a lot of houses getting built in East Cork or in Cork East at the moment, which is great to see. Like it's brilliant to see the number of houses getting built. But I think the headline is that the population is increasing rapidly as well. So we need to do more to keep up with demand. And that's why we're seeing prices increasing, and some of those lists as well for social and affordable housing, maybe not progressing as fast as they should be. Excuse me. So yeah, look, I think Fine Gael have set out some really practical solutions for this. I think there's been numbers of houses committed to delivering over 300,000 homes over the lifetime of the next government if we're re-elected. And I think it's important that we look at every single solution there, right? So not just focusing in on one area, but making sure that we're looking at building more social and affordable homes, looking at cost rental, looking at vacancy and derelict homes as an area, because the most sustainable home is one that's there already. So if there are homes that are lying either vacant or derelict, making sure that we bring those back to life and get families back living in those homes as well. Looking as well at introducing housing for all plan based on the recommendations from the housing commission, and looking at homes for, be it single people or potentially older people looking to downsize. We've had that an awful lot on the doors as well. So Fine Gael have a plan there. We've committed to allocating 40 billion to the housing budget over the next 5 years, averaging around 8 billion annually. That's all been costed. You can take a look at the Fine Gael manifesto. So that's all been costed in. And then making sure as well, like we spoke about it earlier, but my background is recruitment. Like it's one thing to lay out housing targets of the number of social, affordable and cost rental homes and private dwellings that we're going to build each year. And you can see those numbers in the Fine Gael manifesto. But we need to make sure that we're working with the construction sector to make sure that we've got enough people to actually build those homes as well. And from meeting with some developers and from my previous job in recruitment, I know that there is a shortfall in the construction sector of workers. So it's really important that we put a big emphasis on apprenticeships. That was something Simon Harris did when he was in the Department of Higher Education, and something that Minister Patrick O'Donovan has continued to do in providing more support to apprenticeships programs, and then just working with developers to make sure that that they've got the skill set that they need in order to get these homes built. because that's, it's one thing to put the numbers down on paper, but it's really, really important that we look at any issues that could arise to us not hitting these targets, and making sure that we come up with solutions to those as quickly as possible. So that's what I'd like to do if I was elected, is go in and make sure that we do hit those housing targets. In particular, Jack, as someone who's looking to buy a house myself.
Mm. And I think that's a very pertinent point to make. And I just kind of did a quick I just did a quick calculation there while we were talking, and that €8 billion per year that Fine Gael are going to put into housing over the next 5 years, if elected, is kind of it kind of works out that if we take on average that a new build house nationally costs 350,000, right? That will allow Fine Gael to build roughly 20,000 new homes per year.
Yeah, so that 8 billion is from the state. You're not taking into account there as well, private money that's going into it from developers. So this is, we're talking about money that the state are putting in. You're not talking about that 40 billion or that 8 billion a year being the only money that's going into housing.
And it's good to see that we'll have a good kind of like private public partnership when it comes to housing, because if you kind of look at the Nordics and if you look at Germany as well, both those countries are examples of how to use a combination of both public and private money to develop housing.
Yeah, look, the bottom line here, Jack, is that we need more houses built across the board, right? So, it's social, affordable, cost rental, private. It's everything. So it's getting as many homes built as we can, and then it's looking at the infrastructure, in making sure infrastructure is in place as well to support those homes. One of the issues that's been coming up on the doors over the last couple of weeks with us has been, it's great to see new homes being built in East Cork, and I think nationally there's 500 people a week getting the keys to their first home at the moment, which is a great stat to see. But then we need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place as well. I think there is some frustration, let's say, around water, both wastewater and drinking water. No, there's more money committed in the recent budget to Ishgaren, Irish Water, to make sure that the water infrastructure it does get improved. Again, if I'm elected, I want to make sure that all of the water facilities in Cork East are up to scratch. And really advocate hard for investment into the water facility down here. The same goes for transport. So with new homes comes more traffic, because most homes now have an average of 2 cars if they're a 2 adult household. But I'd like to see more investment in public transport so that we can give people a viable option. I think the train from Cork to Cove and Cork to Middleton, that commuter rail link is being upgraded, so it's going to improve frequency and capacity and give people an option to travel by rail. Like that's a brilliant service that's there already, but it's full now most mornings when you head down. I used to travel from Middleton to Cork by train to get to work, and it's full in the morning, so it's great to see that improvement coming in. But again, with the number of new houses being built, we need to look at improving that. We need to look at a hub and spoke model with the train in Middleton, so having local link bus service and improved bus services feeding into the new improved rail link in Middleton from all of the surrounding areas. Collecting people in all of the towns and villages around the area and bringing them into the train station, having that really integrated transport system to get people from A to B by public transport, and again take more cars off the road if we can. I have an idea as well. I don't know if you saw it, Jack, but I put out an idea on Instagram in the first week of the campaign around a harbour taxi for Cork Harbour. I'm not sure if you saw that one, but it's the idea being, I lived in London for a number of years and traveled a little bit by water taxi or water ferry over there, the Thames Clipper. But those services work really well in Nordic countries. It works in Vancouver, it works in Sydney. We actually used to have one in Cork Harbour. Back in the 1850s, there was a passenger ferry service called the Green Boats that used to connect Cove with the city, with Ringaskiddy, with Whitegate. So I put out this idea to bring back a ferry service again into the harbour. And again, with the aim of taking traffic off the road for commuters. So let's say if you're someone who's living in Whitegate or Lower Hata and you're working in Ringaskiddy, that you'll be able to hop on a ferry and get across the harbour. That drive takes over an hour. In particular, in rush hour traffic through the tunnel in the morning can take longer again. But by boat, going at a decent clip across the harbour there, you get from A to B in 10 or 15 minutes. So it would be a more sustainable way to travel. It would connect communities. And then if that service works for commuters, it'll work for tourists as well. From being around Cove, what a great success the cruise liners coming into Cove are. Imagine if we could connect up the rest of the harbour by ferry as well, so that when the cruise liners come in, they still shop in Cove and visit the brilliant Titanic experience and some of the other shops and businesses in Cove, but also that there's an option for them to ferry across the harbour to Crosshaven or potentially even into the city in time. And across and play a game of tennis in Lower Hata, but just connect up the whole harbour by boat. So that's been an idea that's been, I think, pretty well received. I've had a number of companies onto me saying they've tried it in the past and it's fallen down for different reasons, but they really think that now the technology is there to be able to progress with that idea. So transport infrastructure, as I said, is really important. And then, and I'll finish on this point because I know I've talked a lot about this, but I think it is important. Energy infrastructure as well. So, for new housing, again, it's great to set targets and to build new homes, but we need to make sure that we have enough energy to power those homes. I was at an AirGrid conference or an AirGrid public meeting during the week talking about the potential for offshore wind off the coast here. There's huge potential with offshore wind energy that we need to be harnessing. And then I was at the Green Hydrogen Conference in Foda last week as well, talking about the potential for Ireland to be a developer of green hydrogen. And I think that's something that we should definitely be supporting and looking into more. And I think with the Celtic Interconnector now as well, there's a real opportunity in this area. With that work, a real opportunity for us to kind of secure our energy future. But all of those projects need support. So that's why I think it's important that we have hopefully, and again, no vote has been cast, but hopefully a government TD in the area who can work on all of those projects, because like lots of people are moving to Cork East because they realise it's a great place to live and to work and raise a family. But we need to make sure that with that increased population, we've got, our further investment into housing, investment into water, investment in energy, and investment into amenities as well, because you can't put in lots and lots of houses and not improve your walking infrastructure. The Greenway to Middleton and Youghal is going to be excellent, but we need to make sure that we have good cycleways, good walkways, good parks, playgrounds, sports facilities. With the increased population, all of those areas need investment as well.
And this kind of brings me on to a question I had for you there. Is we've kind of about the green hydrogen that you just raised, Mark, and the wind energy. I was reading an article not too long ago that I think was it the Irish Times or in the Independent, I can't remember off the top of my head now, was it kind of stated that with the development of these offshore sites for wind energy, that it could actually turn Ireland into the Saudi Arabia of renewable energy and also for green hydrogen. And I kind of thought that is absolutely incredible that Ireland could be the world leader in green hydrogen and wind energy, because I was kind of looking online at the kind of size of the wind turbines they're looking to put in place. And I think at any one time, the Irish National Grid needs about 5 gigawatts. And I think they were actually saying the amount of power that they were actually going to generate as a result of when these wind farms are built by the mid 2030s was that they were going to have an energy surplus of about 8 to 9 gigawatts of electricity that could be sent via the European Interconnector back to Europe. And that's an amazing way for the country to make additional money.
Definitely. And I think like you hit the nail on the head there. There's huge opportunity and huge potential for Ireland to be an exporter of energy and clean green energy as well, which is you know even like in the Saudi comparison, you're talking about fossil fuels there. This is renewable energy that we're talking about here. So there's huge potential and huge opportunity there. I've met with EirGrid, and look, we need to continue to invest in the grid and make sure that improvements continue to happen there. I know there's some fantastic work and some brilliant people working in those companies, like really, really smart engineers working in the energy sector in Ireland, and lots of fantastic companies that have moved to Cork in particular to work on these projects. But it's important that government support those areas. So definitely an area that I want to support if I get elected. I had a tour of the Port Cork facility in Ringaskiddy a couple of weeks ago as well, and saw, the dock infrastructure that's going in there to support these massive, you referenced it there, the wind turbines that would go off the coast are going to be absolutely huge. So it's important that the dock infrastructure is built to be able to cater for those as well, so that they can be assembled, in the port and then put out to sea. Like it's all big industry, it's all jobs, and it's look it we should focus in as well on energy costs for people. I know something that you probably want to touch on later is cost of living. Energy costs have definitely increased. We've seen that since the war in Ukraine in particular. So we need to focus on developing our own energy in Ireland to reduce energy costs, which should help bring down the cost of everything else in Ireland as well. But that's why it's got to be a really key area for the next government to focus in on, to make sure that happens, because we're competing with other countries for this as well. There are some other countries that are also developing their offshore wind capabilities. I think Scotland in particular and the Netherlands and places are all developing offshore wind. We're an island in the Atlantic. You'll know from being down around Cove. Well, the harbour's pretty sheltered, but if you head down to beyond it, down towards Roach's Point or places, you know how windy it can get out there. So, we should be absolutely maximizing our green energy off the coast.
Definitely. And this kind of brings me on to my next question, Mark. Is kind of like we've kind of talked on energy, we've kind of talked public transport, and we've talked a bit on education. This kind of brings me on to healthcare, which is a very, very pertinent issue for a lot of listeners to the podcast and a lot of listeners here in East Cork and also nationally. A lot of the listeners that are kind of writing in want to know, with the HSE under severe strain, how will Fine Gael improve efficiency and reduce waiting lists while ensuring patients in rural areas receive timely care, and also ensuring that staffing demands within the HSE are met given the staffing crisis currently faced by the HSE?
Yeah, and look, I think healthcare is a really, really important issue for us to focus in on. The Fine Gael manifesto has laid out a number of plans to help drive down waiting lists, including opening new surgical hubs and elective hospitals right across the country, but here in Cork. So I'm not going to go over absolutely everything in the manifesto, but there's some really good plans that I encourage people to go on and take a look at there as to how Fine Gael would look at improving this. Again, look, the area that I know and the area that I can talk about is recruitment and retention, because that's my background is recruitment. I think we really need to focus in on the number of people that we're training, similar to the construction sector, looking at the workforce, looking at the number of therapy program places and improving those across physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, all of the allied health professions, and making sure that we're training enough people. But then when they're qualifying, that the places are there for them as well. I was disappointed with the HSE hiring embargo. I don't think that should happen. The when something like that comes into place, it's really damaging overall to staff morale, but also to the number of people that we have working in the system. And you still end up hiring a lot of people through agency spend, so that or through agency staff, but we should be hiring permanent staff into the HSE. We should be doing everything we can to retain the staff we have, to retain any graduates who graduate out of, any of the medical fields, or nursing or midwifery, any of those fields. We should be doing everything we can to make sure that there are places in healthcare settings for those people, so that we can, recruit them. Because again, with the growing population, similar to housing, we need more people working in healthcare. We need more, physical hospitals, more primary healthcare centres. I know that the primary healthcare centre in Cove is operating really well now. There's a new primary healthcare centre touted for Middleton, and an increase, or an expansion of Middleton Hospital. There's a new primary healthcare centre has recently been given planning permission in Youghal. So, there is investment and there is work happening in all of these locations. But again, if elected, I want to make sure that we increase training places, we increase the number of people, and we support the people that are already in place. Like retaining healthcare staff is really, really important. There's a commitment in the Fine Gael manifesto to establish a working group to examine potential for flexible, fair, defined periods of service for into the HSE for healthcare graduates in particular. So I think they're all areas that we need to heavily focus in on.
Definitely. And another kind of big kind of issue that is being faced within the healthcare, or the health service, is staffing and retention. And I've kind of seen this myself in CUH when I was up there a few weeks ago, and I was waiting while I was being treated. Was they are chronically understaffed. It's very, like, I can commend Fine Gael and everything for building additional infrastructure, but that infrastructure is kind of, how would I put this now? That infrastructure is brilliant, but it's not worth having unless we invest into people. Would you agree?
100%, yeah. That's exactly what I was saying, is that,
Mm.
the new hospitals are great, but you need the staff, and enough staff to be able to work there, to make sure that the staff that we have aren't,
Mm.
the wards that we have, or that the services that we have aren't under resourced. And then the more staff that we can bring into those settings, and train in those settings, the better,
Mm.
working model that we have for the people
Yeah.
that work there already. And then we'll see reduction in waiting lists too. So I want to work with all of the healthcare professions to make sure that they have what they need, and that they're being properly treated and properly looked after. We're competing internationally for healthcare staff. We train amazing healthcare staff in Ireland.
Mm.
I think the universities and the different healthcare settings do a really, really good job of training high quality staff. Excuse me. But we need to make sure then that we're competitive internationally, so that, while we're always going to have people that, choose to leave for a while, we don't ever want that to be the case, because people feel they have to leave. There should be roles here for people. There should be houses here for people. There should be a really good quality of life here for people, so that if people want to stay in Ireland, they can. And look, if they choose to leave and they want to go and explore the world, or experience a different country for a while, that's fine too. But
Mm.
for anyone who's here, we need to make sure that the quality of work is here for them. And then, for anyone who's choosing to return, we need to make sure and take a look at that area as well. I lived in London myself for
Mm.
a number of years, as I mentioned, and came back, and there are some challenges to returning home, that we need to examine. We need to make sure that, if a doctor or a nurse, or speech and language therapist has gone abroad to, you know Canada or Australia or Dubai or something for a number of years, or across the board, whether it's teachers or construction workers or anything, we need to make sure that it's easy for them if they choose to come home. So
Mm.
looking at things like insurance, looking at things like, their driver's licenses, looking at housing, looking at bank accounts, all of that stuff, we need to examine and make sure that it's simple for people to come back and pick up where they left off, or pick up with, pick up the I guess the lifestyle or similar that they had in the other countries that they were in. Because that's a challenge that I'm hearing a bit at the moment as well from friends who've gone abroad, is that it can be difficult if you've been abroad for a number of years. Like, it's already a challenge to pack up everything, all of your stuff, and bring it back. But everything else then we need to make sure is streamlined and simple for people. Really straightforward. We need to digitize a lot of the public services to make sure that people can easily register, get in with a GP, get their car insurance, get the different health insurance, things like that they need, so that we can encourage people to come home.
Definitely. And this kind of brings me on to my next question, Mark, is about mental health services. As we've both seen, the mental health services in the country are chronically underfunded at the moment. And people are asking, what specific policies will Fine Gael introduce to address Ireland's mental health crises, particularly for young people and those in marginalised communities who are most affected by the mental health crisis?
Really important issue. And look, one that I take really seriously. Again, something I would have seen a lot in my time in the Students' Union, but also have friends who've been affected over time as well. There's a lot of detail again listed in the Fine Gael manifesto on this, so I'm not going to go over absolutely everything from that. But there's a real strong section in the manifesto looking at again, recruitment within the mental health care professions being really important, particularly in the community. So your CAMS settings, and expanding on that, so that the supports are there for people. I think providing targeted care programs as well. So looking at early intervention programs being really important across psychosis, eating disorders, ADHD, and anyone with a dual diagnosis. Like, it's about having supports there for people. It's so important. And then again, like investing in so like, for example, in my place, or in Middleton, we've got the youth hub, My Place, which opened back when I was in school, and it's a fantastic facility that's being utilised a lot now by the community. There's a huge number of groups that use it, but making sure that those types of services are youth centres and youth clubs are invested in, so that people have a place to go and that they know it's there, and that if people do fall on hard times, that then they know where to go, and that the support services are there. I think that's really, really important. And again, look, investing in like sports clubs and that whole area as well, to make sure that people have access to, particularly in rural areas, have access to clubs and societies and all of that sort of stuff, so that it's so, like, sport is so good for your mental health, to make, and that camaraderie and all of that, so to make sure that we're investing in all of those areas to help improve the situation there.
And this kind of brings me on to another question, because mental health and the next one are kind of both tied in with each other, is the cost of living. I know we spoke on it kind of briefly a few minutes ago, but this is a very, how would I put it? It's a very big concern for a lot of families that would be messaging into the podcast. With rising living costs, how will Fine Gael ensure that economic relief reaches those in need without overburdening future generations who may feel left behind by the economic relief?
So on the future generations piece, we are, like, Fine Gael are committed to putting money aside as well in each budget. And again, there's more information on that in the manifesto, but there has been money put into a rainy day fund to make sure that the austerity that we saw in the past isn't repeated in the future. Because I know from working in business, how important a strong economy is to be able to support, to offer all of these supports. And I think Ashley Donoghue and Fine Gael, successive Fine Gael governments have done a fantastic job in managing the economy over the last 14 years, to go from where we were in deficit and with the IMF in town and working through austerity, to now running annual budget surpluses and being able to put measures in place to support with the cost of living. Now, that being said, a lot of the business, or a lot of the doors that we're knocking on, I'm hearing it from people who are saying they're working two really good jobs, and they still don't feel like at the end of the month they've got enough to show for it. They're really feeling that increased cost. So I think in the budget, there were some measures put in place. There was a reduction in the USC. There was an increase in the upper rate of the upper threshold of tax. Again, there's other measures put in place in the Fine Gael manifesto to make sure that to make sure that we continue to examine that area. It's something for me again that I feel really strongly about. I'd like to see all areas of society supported on this, and I think it's vital that we get this right, because it's one thing to have a strong and working economy, but it's another thing entirely if people aren't feeling that in their pockets and are feeling under pressure. It's really not a nice place to be. So definitely an area that I want to go in and focus on if elected is reducing that cost of living further.
And this kind of brings me on to a kind of core comorbidity with the cost of living is pension age. As we've seen, thankfully, due to our brilliant kind of level of medical care for citizens, and that's available. We've kind of seen life expectancies are increasing. How will Fine Gael ensure that the pension system remains fair and sustainable without forcing people to retire later than they can afford to?
Yeah, so I think Fine Gael is seeking to enact legislation to remove the mandatory retirement age of 65 in some employment contracts to allow people to work past 65 if they want to. The party is also looking at increasing the weekly state pension rate over the lifetime of the next government to €350, and retaining the benefit payment for 65-year-olds, and continuing that payment then for retiring at 65 until they reach pension age 66, with no further requirement to sign on. So it's definitely an area that Fine Gael are aware of and that we're focusing in on. We need to support older people and support the aging population without, as you mentioned earlier, creating too much of a tax burden on future generations. I think it's important too to focus in on supports for older people, full stop. So I was down with the All Active Retirement and met the group down there a few weeks ago. They do some fantastic work. It's about working with groups like that to make sure that people in retirement are supported and feel supported by government.
And this kind of brings me on to my next point is we've kind of seen we've kind of heard in the news that Fine Gael are the party of law and order. And this brings me on to my next question of crime and policing. What is Fine Gael's approach to reducing rising crime rates, and how will Fine Gael balance tough enforcement with rehabilitative programs for offenders?
So it's important to remember, Fine Gael reopened Templemore, the Garda Training College, and we're now seeing a lot more Gardaí being trained. Like everything else, it's important that we recruit enough Gardaí over the next 5 years. The commitment in the Fine Gael manifesto is to recruit 6,000 Gardaí over the next 5 years, to both keep up with the demands of an increasing population, because it's really important that we have enough Gardaí, but also to replace retiring Gardaí. Now, we're also looking at rewarding long service, so incentivizing Gardaí to stay in the force for longer, by building on the recent increases in the retirement age to 62, and looking at the civilianization of non-core tasks. So reassigning at least 500 Gardaí to frontline duties and transferring those roles to those non-core tasks to civilian staff, and that would allow Gardaí to focus on community policing. And I think community policing is really important. It's one of the real distinctions of the Irish force is that community-based approach and community element. Knowing the local Garda and the local Garda, knowing the area, knowing the people, knowing the community is what makes them so effective. So supporting them in doing that. I think looking at upgrading Garda stations nationwide as well, making sure that we have implement the new Garda capital plan. And then there's a whole range again within the manifesto of additional supports for Gardaí, but Like I think we're really lucky with the force that we have. They're fantastic people working in the Garda force, and it's about making sure that we support them in government as well.
Mm. And this kind of ties me into my next question on immigration, because kind of crime and policing and immigration are all kind of interlinked in their kind of own various ways. And this kind of question comes in from a lot of viewers now who are kind of worried about um the security of the borders and the massive influx of migration we've seen over the last 2.5 years since the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, I think we need to be careful there, Jack, around tying crime to immigration.
Mm,
I think that's something to be wary of, because that's not necessarily the case. Like, this is the first general election where immigration has been a key issue. Um, it's the first time that it's been one of the key issues both on the doors but also in the national media. And yeah, that comes down to changes since the last election. So you mentioned the war in Ukraine. We've also got conflicts in the Middle East and Palestine, and there's a number of humanitarian crises happening in Africa. So a lot of these people are fleeing persecution. We see the obviously the tragedies and the boats crossing the Mediterranean.
mm,
We see the number obviously of people who come here from Ukraine and fleeing the war there, and like some horrible stories. My parents had a Ukrainian family living with them for a number of months, when the war began in Ukraine. So it's very important to remember the human element and in all of this, because I think some elements out there can focus in on some of the negatives and some small stories and some negatives within immigration. Some people who come and take advantage of Irish hospitality. Now, I think we do need to be strong and firm on that.
mm,
So we need to make sure that we've got um, a very fair and humanitarian based approach and immigration policy for people who are coming here either to seek asylum, and as well to make sure that the door is open for those who want to come and work and study and fill jobs here. Like I mentioned earlier, we've massive gaps in the construction sector. We've gaps in the healthcare sector. You'll know from attending hospital that we rely heavily on non-national staff. We need to make sure that the door is open for those people to fill those skills deficits. And Ireland is still it's the country of 100,000 welcomes. So we need to keep that. At the same time, I think Simon Harris has spoken about this. We need to be firm on our system. We need to be firm in our border security and make sure that people aren't coming here and taking advantage of that Irish hospitality. And that's an area that I think the new government will work in conjunction with the European Union and the EU Migration Pact. I think Fine Gael have committed to publishing a national migration and integration strategy. So we'll look at focusing in on that in the next all, because this is a new area. We need to move away as well from emergency use of hotels for housing asylum seekers, and put in place facilities for those seeking protection on state land. Because I think that's an area, like, we haven't touched on it yet, but supporting small business is key, and the hospitality sector in Ireland is obviously hugely valuable and hugely important. So we need to
mm.
lessen that emergency use of hotels right across the country, and get those back to focusing in on the hospitality sector. But yeah, I think, as I said, being firm but fair is
Yeah.
probably the key for our migration policy.
And this kind of brings me on to um our kind of business related question is, what measures will Fine Gael introduce to protect small to medium enterprises while also allowing them to flourish?
Yeah, so I've been speaking with a lot of small businesses. We had Peter Burke, Minister for Enterprise, down to East Cork a few weeks ago, to promote the Power Up grant. Like, within the manifesto, again, there's a number of areas outlined. I know within the hospitality sector in particular, we've included a commitment to reduce the VAT rate from 13.5% down to 9%. We've also looked at PRSI rebate, because I know that that's an area that a lot of small businesses have flagged. But it's about speaking with businesses, listening with small businesses, and trying to support them as much as possible to cope with the cost of living, the increased costs of doing business, and make sure that for in particular, our indigenous businesses, our small businesses, and our indigenous economy, that we're doing what we can to support and promote those businesses and support entrepreneurs as well, and entrepreneurship. That's really, really important. Obviously, we've got a fantastic multinational sector, and foreign direct investment into the country is very strong, but we need to make sure that our indigenous economy is strong as well. There is a Power Up grant available for small businesses. I know there were some challenges with that, and again, I guess just to show the impact of or the feedback loop that exists. We brought Peter Burke to Middleton a couple of weeks ago to promote the Power Up grant. That's a €4,000 grant for small businesses within hospitality, retail, and the beauty sectors. There were some challenges with businesses applying for those grants. There a couple of different reasons. I won't get into all of them now, but we managed to give that feedback that those challenges exists back to the Minister's office, and that's being discussed at Cabinet now. The extension for applying for that grant was extended, so that a solution could be reached for that as well. So from speaking with businesses around East Cork, they gave us that feedback, and we were able to feedback that back to the Minister's office and see the deadline expanded. So it just shows, I guess, the that government are listening, even to people like myself who aren't necessarily even elected yet. They're very much listening, and willing to work with small businesses to make improvements.
And this kind of rings me on to kind of about political parties listening, and all this is about political accountability. What measures will Fine Gael introduce to improve transparency and accountability among politicians and public officials, including public and civil servants?
Yeah, so I think it's important that we look at the public procurement, so that we review and enhance the government public procurement process. Make sure that we conduct a review there to make sure that that's very transparent, accountable. In particular, increased participation from small and medium-sized enterprises in Ireland, and take a really consistent approach there. There's some, again, within the Fine Gael manifesto, there's some commitments to political reform as well. So looking at a reform of the ethics in the Public Office of Legislation, looking at overhauling that within the first years of government, looking at and expanding the remit of the Public Accounts Committee as well. I think we've seen them on the news over the last couple of years. I think they've done really good work in oversight, but looking at expanding that to include local authorities to ensure that there's accountability for delivery in key areas, in particular within housing and local property tax, and as well looking at a new consolidated Department of Infrastructure. This is one of the big ideas that Fine Gael are putting forward. So consolidating Department of Infrastructure, Climate and Transport to manage strategic infrastructure projects and all capital projects over €100 million. So the state would have a team then reporting to the Cabinet Minister for day-to-day accountability. And I think with a department like that, you would be able to pool like really strong in-house expertise to be able to manage the delivery of those capital projects. Because we've touched on it a couple of times, Jack, but across like the big water infrastructure projects, the big energy infrastructure projects, the big healthcare infrastructure projects, we need to get better nationally at delivering big multi-million euro, multi-annual projects. We've got some fantastic people working in different government departments, but I think the idea here is to consolidate that into a Department of Infrastructure that would have real expertise and be able to deliver those types of projects going forward.
And I think infrastructure is only going to get more important over the next few years, because if we look at it, energy security, big issue. So Department of Infrastructure will be brilliant there. We're also seeing at the moment now the new motorway that's being built between Cork and Ringaskiddy. That's a massive infrastructure project. And I know this has kind of been put on the back burner, but also the Cork to Limerick motorway, that's going to be a big benefit as well for people, because if you think about it, Cork and Limerick are the two largest cities in the south west of the country. So kind of like having that motorway is going to be crucial as well.
Oh,
And
it
also,
absolutely should be connected by a motorway, like 100%. And as well, we need to look at, bypass or a new road connecting Middleton and Youghal to bypass Killen and Castlemartyr. That's vital for Youghal and vital for the East Cork region as a whole. I think again, with the number of new homes going in, and the increased traffic on the road, I think it's really important. I have an idea as well. I've met with Iron Road Aaron on this, but there's an idea to run a rapid bus transit service connecting Youghal and the train station in Middleton along the Greenway. So it will be expanding the Greenway and running a rapid bus service between Middleton and Youghal. Look wider, eventually it would be fantastic to reopen the train between Middleton and Youghal, and that has to stay as an ambition. There is enough room alongside the Greenway because there used to be a twin track there previously. The Greenway is put along one side, but there is enough room on the other side to run a railway between Middleton and Youghal, but that's not in the current National Development Plan. So something like this as an intermediary, solution could be something that could be delivered quite quickly and pretty cost effectively. And again, look at taking traffic off the road and connecting up towns like Youghal, Killa, Mogeely, obviously connect with Castlemartyr into the train station in Middleton. As well, I know you're a Cove man yourself, and it's important, really important. I was in Cove last night. It's really important that we look at a second road access point for Cove, for the island, for people getting on and off. The photo road, it serves its purpose, but it's definitely a risk that if something happens there and there's an emergency on the island, that we have a second road access point on and off the island for people. So that's something, again, that I'd like to push. But with all of these projects, they're all big infrastructure projects, and that's where I think a Department of Infrastructure could play a role.
And this kind of brings us on to our kind of final question, Mark, and you've played a blinder so far, is about agriculture. Because, like, as we know, agriculture is a massive sector here in the country. And the question that's coming in from farmers and agri-businesses alike in East Cork is, what steps will Fine Gael take to support Irish farmers in maintaining competitiveness while also meeting the strict environmental targets set by the European Union?
Yeah, so we've got some of the best farmland in the country in East Cork, in Cork East and North Cork. It's no accident that Jameson and Irish distillers are based here because of the quality of the world-class malting barley and the really strong tillage land that we have. They're based here, and they're also putting in a multi-million euro expansion into Middleton, because, again, of the quality of the barley and the quality of the land that we have down here. On the dairy side as well, world-class dairy here. We've got Dairy Gold based down here. So there's world-class land and food produced from farmers in East and North Cork, and it's really important that we support those farmers going forward. I think a fair cap for farmers is definitely important. We need to fight for that fair share of the EU budget. Looking at fighting to increase the cap budget and advocating for new funding streams to assist farmers with those additional needs. I think developing a simpler cap as well post 2027. So simplifying schemes to help deliver the best outcomes for farmers and consumers and the environment, and push for that whole farm costing approach. I think we need to simplify the administrative burden on farmers as well. So working to reduce red tape through more flexible, farmer-friendly schemes that reward actions across all sectors, and having stakeholder input into the design of that as well. And then we need to review the payment redistribution measures. So assisting with the impact on farm viability. There's lots of areas in there, I think, that are really important. But the key here is that we support the farming industry, in particular in a rural constituency like Cork East. And there's been lots of farmers have supported me so far in my candidacy, and have come out and I've spoken with them about their concerns. I've spoken with them about the areas that they'd like to focus in on, and if I'm elected, I definitely want to be a strong voice for farmers in Cork East.
Yeah, and I think that's a major issue for a lot of farmers because I know, is that kind of government support because we kind of saw it on prime time last night was the kind of supports for farmers were kind of waning, and a lot of farmers were kind of looking for support. So that's very good to hear. So, Mark, this is the kind of our last question we're going to ask you now before we let you go. Is where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
That's bring me right back to my recruitment my recruitment days, Jack. That's one of the questions that we would ask people when they're looking at changing jobs. And it's funny, it's always it's one of the stereotypical questions to ask, but look, hopefully if people choose or are happy with me as a candidate, hopefully I'll be elected in a week's time. But I am asking people for that support, and asking people to consider voting me, ideally number one, but voting me somewhere down the line. If not one, then some other preference further down the line to give me that support. I hope I've done enough over this interview and over the last few weeks in meeting with people that they will trust me as someone to represent them and represent the area down here. I will work as hard as I can if I am elected. And hopefully then, if I am elected in 5 years' time, Jack, myself and yourself will be having another conversation like this, and we'll be in the middle of another election in exactly 5 years.
Exactly. And Mark, just a question for our younger listeners, if you don't mind, is hey, for someone who wants to get involved in politics, what would you encourage them to do?
I've spoken with some people. So I was involved with Corlin and Oak when I was in school. I was involved in student council, Corlin and Oak. Then in UCC, I was in the students' union. Like, go and get involved, and you don't necessarily need to go and be the chairman of the Corla or the president of the students' union, but just go and get involved in youth politics. Like that is really important, because you never know where it could lead to. Like, I'm someone new running for the Dáil, and I look at people that I worked with in the students' union across different parties back in 2014. There's quite a number of them now running for the Dáil around the country, which is great to see, because they're people with really great ideas and people who've been involved in student politics and youth advocacy groups in the past. Even if that's too much of a step, get involved in a committee of a sports club or a theatre group. Go and ask those kinds of questions. Go and ask if you can help out doing the social media for your sports club or your theatre group or in your school. Go and get involved, because it's so rewarding. Everything I've done so far, I've really, really enjoyed. And I just couldn't encourage people more to go out and get involved, because life moves fast. Like, it's crazy for me to think that it's 10 years since I was in the student union. That feels like a year ago. So don't wait. Go and get involved in something, tomorrow, or next week. Go and sign up for something and volunteer, and you never know where you might end up.
And so, Mark, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast this morning. And we wish you the very, very best of luck with everything. And we hope to talk to you next week, hopefully after your election to the Dáil. So, folks, this has been our interview with Mark Stanton, the Fine Gael candidate for Cork East. Folks, we'll be back again in the next few days with a few more episodes on the upcoming election. So we'll see you then.